The National Electrical Code, or NEC, does not generally mandate ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection for receptacles installed in dining rooms. The NEC mandates GFCI protection for receptacles situated in wet or damp locations, or those located within 6 feet of a sink. Furthermore, receptacles in exterior locations are also required to have GFCI protection. Without a first-hand view of the particular dining and breakfast area in question, it is difficult to definitively explain why the inspector is requiring GFCI protection. It is possible that a specific local ordinance exists that mandates it. In many instances, provided that the dining and breakfast area is separate from the kitchen and there is no presence of water, GFCI protection is typically not required. To clarify, let's delve into the specific sections of the NEC that address GFCI protection. Article 210.8 of the NEC outlines the requirements for GFCI protection. Subsection A covers dwelling units, and it lists various locations where GFCI protection is required for 125 volts through 250 volts receptacles. These locations primarily involve areas where water is likely to be present, such as bathrooms, garages, and outdoors. The absence of dining rooms in this list is significant. Subsection B of 210.8 pertains to other than dwelling units and has its own list of locations that require GFCI protection. Again, dining rooms are not explicitly mentioned. The rationale behind GFCI protection is to prevent electrical shock hazards in areas where moisture is present. A GFCI device monitors the current flowing into and out of a circuit. If there is an imbalance, indicating that current is leaking to ground, the GFCI trips and cuts off the power, thus preventing a potentially fatal shock. In a typical dining room setting, the risk of such an electrical shock is minimal due to the absence of water sources. The NEC is a comprehensive set of standards designed to ensure electrical safety. It is updated every 3 years to incorporate new technologies and address emerging safety concerns. While the NEC provides a baseline for electrical installations, local jurisdictions may adopt their own amendments or additions to the code to address specific local conditions. These local ordinances can be more stringent than the NEC itself. Therefore, it's essential to consult with local authorities to determine if any specific regulations apply to dining room receptacles in the area. It's also important to consider the function of the dining room. If the dining room is used for other purposes, such as a home office or a play area, the electrical requirements might differ. For example, if an aquarium is present in a dining room, GFCI protection might be advisable for the receptacle serving the aquarium. The NEC also addresses the types of circuits that can serve dining room receptacles. Generally, dining room receptacles can be served by either a 15 amps or a 20 amp circuit. The specific requirements depend on the types of appliances that are likely to be used in the dining room. If the dining room is likely to be used for cooking appliances, such as a toaster or a coffee maker, a 20 amp circuit is recommended. In addition to GFCI protection, the NEC also specifies requirements for the spacing of receptacles in dwelling units. The general rule is that receptacles should be spaced no more than 12 feet apart so that no point along the wall line is more than 6 feet from a receptacle. This requirement ensures that extension cords are not overused, which can create a safety hazard. The NEC also addresses the installation of arc fault circuit interrupters, or SIs. SIs are designed to protect against electrical fires caused by arc faults. An arc fault is an unintentional electrical discharge between two or more conductors. SIs are typically required in bedroom circuits and other areas where fire hazards are more likely to occur. While SIs are not specifically required for dining room circuits, they can provide an additional layer of protection. When installing electrical wiring in a dining room, it is important to follow all applicable codes and standards. This includes using the correct size of wire, properly grounding the circuit, and ensuring that all connections are tight and secure. It is also important to use high-quality electrical components that are listed by a recognized testing laboratory, such as Underwriters Laboratories, or ALL. The inspector's requirement for GFCI protection in the dining room may stem from a misunderstanding of the NEC or from a specific local ordinance. It is important to communicate with the inspector and to understand the basis for the requirement. If the requirement is based on a misunderstanding of the NEC, you can provide the inspector with documentation to support your position. If the requirement is based on a local ordinance, you must comply with the ordinance. In some cases, it may be possible to obtain a variance from the local ordinance if you can demonstrate that the installation is safe and that it meets the intent of the code. The intent of the code is to protect people and property from electrical hazards. The NEC is a complex document and it can be difficult to interpret in some cases. If you have any questions about the NEC, you should consult with a qualified electrical contractor or a certified electrical inspector. A qualified electrical contractor can provide you with expert advice on the installation of electrical wiring and equipment. A certified electrical inspector can ensure that the installation meets all applicable codes and standards. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and that it protects people and property from electrical hazards. In summary, the NEC does not generally require GFCI protection for dining room receptacles. However, local ordinances may impose additional requirements. It is important to communicate with the inspector and to understand the basis for any requirements that exceed the NEC. By following all applicable codes and standards, you can ensure that the electrical installation is safe and that it protects people and property from electrical hazards. Let's discuss some specific scenarios where GFCI protection might be considered in a dining room, even if it's not strictly required by the NEC. Firstly, if the dining room is located adjacent to a kitchen and there is a countertop that extends into the dining room, a receptacle serving that countertop might require GFCI protection if it falls within the 6-foot distance from the sink. Secondly, if the dining room is used for activities that involve water, such as painting or crafting, GFCI protection might be advisable. Thirdly, if there are young children or elderly individuals living in the home, GFCI protection can provide an added layer of safety, even in areas where it's not strictly required. It's important to remember that GFCI protection is not a substitute for safe electrical practices. It's still essential to avoid overloading circuits, using damaged cords, and touching electrical devices with wet hands. However, GFCI protection can significantly reduce the risk of electrical shock in the event of an accident. In addition to GFCI protection, it's also important to ensure that all electrical wiring in the dining room is properly grounded. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, which helps to trip the circuit breaker and prevent electrical shock. The NEC specifies detailed requirements for grounding electrical systems. These requirements include the use of grounding electrodes, grounding conductors, and bonding jumpers. It's important to follow these requirements carefully to ensure that the electrical system is properly grounded. The NEC also addresses the use of extension cords. Extension cords should only be used on a temporary basis, and they should be sized appropriately for the load that they are serving. Extension cords should not be run under carpets or rugs, as this can create a fire hazard. The NEC also prohibits the use of daisy-chain extension cords, as this can overload the circuit. If you need to provide power to a device that is located far from a receptacle, it's best to install a new receptacle rather than using an extension cord. The NEC also specifies requirements for the installation of lighting fixtures in dining rooms. Lighting fixtures should be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and they should be properly supported. Lighting fixtures should not be installed in locations where they are likely to be damaged or where they could create a safety hazard. The NEC also addresses the use of dimmer switches. Dimmer switches should be rated for the type of lighting fixture that they are controlling. It's important to use a dimmer switch that is compatible with the lighting fixture to prevent flickering or other problems. The NEC also specifies requirements for the installation of smoke detectors in dwelling units. Smoke detectors should be installed in each sleeping room, outside of each sleeping area, and on each level of the dwelling unit. Smoke detectors should be tested regularly to ensure that they are functioning properly. The NEC also recommends the use of carbon monoxide detectors in dwelling units that have fuel-burning appliances. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas that can be deadly. Carbon monoxide detectors can alert you to the presence of carbon monoxide in your home. The NEC is a living document that is constantly being updated to reflect new technologies and safety concerns. It's important to stay up to date on the latest changes to the NEC to ensure that your electrical installations are safe and compliant. You can purchase a copy of the NEC from the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. You can also access the NEC online through various subscription services. In addition to the NEC, there are also a number of other resources available to help you understand electrical safety. These resources include books, articles, websites, and training courses. By taking the time to educate yourself about electrical safety, you can help to protect yourself and your family from electrical hazards. Let's also consider the inspector's perspective. The electrical inspectors are responsible for ensuring that electrical installations meet the requirements of the NEC and local codes. They play a vital role in protecting public safety. Inspectors are trained to identify potential electrical hazards and to ensure that electrical installations are performed correctly. They have the authority to require that electrical work be corrected if it does not meet the code. While it can be frustrating to deal with an inspector who seems to be overly strict, it's important to remember that they are ultimately trying to protect the public. If you disagree with an inspector's decision, you have the right to appeal their decision to a higher authority. However, it's important to do so in a respectful and professional manner. The NEC is a complex document, and it's possible that the inspector has a different interpretation of the code than you do. It's also possible that the inspector is aware of a local ordinance that you are not familiar with. In some cases, it may be possible to reach a compromise with the inspector. For example, you might be able to install GFCI protection in some of the dining room receptacles, but not all of them. Ultimately, the goal is to reach a solution that is safe and compliant with the code. Finally, let's address the specific concern about kitchen appliance circuits feeding dining room receptacles. The NEC allows dining room receptacles to be supplied by one of the 2 or more 20 amp small appliance branch circuits that serve the kitchen and other specified rooms. However, the key point is that these small appliance circuits are required to have GFCI protection for all receptacle outlets. So, if the dining room receptacles are indeed fed by a kitchen small appliance circuit, they would inherently be GFCI protected because the kitchen receptacles on that circuit must have GFCI protection. The concern about series connection arises because the GFCI device protects the entire circuit downstream from it. If a fault occurs at any receptacle on the circuit, the GFCI will trip, interrupting power to all receptacles on that circuit, including those in the dining room. Therefore, while the dining room receptacles themselves might not individually require GFCI protection based on their location, the connection to a GFCI protected kitchen small appliance circuit effectively extends the protection to the dining room. In conclusion, understand the local and national codes, communicate clearly with inspectors, and prioritize safety in all electrical work.